disease. The church cemeteries were filling up quickly, and the churches didn't really want the bodies in their graveyards for fear of the disease spreading, so a new pit was dug outside the city walls. Unfortunately, they didn't understand cholera in 1832, and putting the bodies outside the walls didn't stop the disease spreading, as cholera is not an airborne disease, but is spread by sewage and dirty water. Memorial Gardens. These are gardens dedicated to those who lost their lives in the First and Second World War. This is our nearest stop for the National Railway Museum. If you take a trip around the National Railway Museum, you will find something in there for everyone, not just the rail enthusiast. Do allow plenty of time for your visit there, as the museum is huge. It is also every Yorkshireman's favourite price to enter: free. If you look through the arch, you will see a cream-coloured building. This is the original station hotel. This is where, on one visit, Queen Victoria stopped off when travelling to Balmoral by train in 1854. She was with Prince Albert and her children, and they took lunch in the station hotel. There is a tale that when Victoria was given the bill for lunch, she was so incensed that she vowed never to come to York again. I'm not sure what was said, but I'm guessing one was not amused. Put in the city walls to allow for easier traffic flow in 1876, and move onto Lendal Bridge, which was opened in 1861. Collapsed and wasn't reopened until 1863. It crosses the River Ouse, York's main river, which takes its name from the Celtic or pre-Celtic Oudsos, and probably means simply water or slow-flowing river. Is York Minster, the jewel in York's crown and the largest Gothic cathedral in northern Europe. This present building took 252 years to complete. It was started in 1220 and not finished off until 1472. We say it's complete, but in actual fact the central tower should have a spire, about another 32 metres or 100 feet in height on the top, but the weight of the spire would have collapsed the central tower, so it was never built. The Minster has 128 stained glass windows containing over 3 million pieces of glass. York Information Centre. Times of evensong and other services in the Minster can be found there, or of course from the Minster itself. Whatever you do whilst you are here in York, please give the Minster a visit. It is stunning on the outside and simply breathtaking on the inside. Is York Theatre Royal, which was built in 1744 on and among the site of the medieval St Leonard's Hospital. It has undergone several refurbishments. The one in 1880 replaced the front of the building with this Victorian look, which some say is because the man who designed it didn't particularly like York. This is the nearest stop for York Minster, the Art Gallery, King's Manor, Bootham Bar, and the nicest section of the city wall, as well as the Visit York Information Centre. Thank you to anyone leaving us at this point. We hope that you have enjoyed your tour with York City sightseeing. We hope you will join us again, here or at any of our other destinations worldwide. If we do, this bus will be leaving shortly. The tour will take approximately 1 hour, during which we will be pointing out places of interest and telling you something of the history of our beautiful city. Your ticket is valid for 24 hours from the time of purchase. Note that this does not mean we run all through the night, and you will find the last full tour times of the day in your red leaflet. You will see the red York City sightseeing buses coming in and out of the square, or York's Great Exhibition in 1879. Standing in front of the art gallery is a statue of William Etty, who was a York-born painter from the Victorian times. His art was displayed in the art gallery to our left, but not as you would see them today. He was a fine painter, but Etty was a painter of nudes, and that was deemed risque, so his pictures were covered up. William Etty's statue was of French origin, like barricade and barrier. It simply bars the way into the city, and of course bars are pubs. Still confused? On our right is Goulburn Bar, which is one of the 4 main gateways into the city. It is the most northern of the gateways and is around 800 years old. It actually stands on the site of the Porta Principalis Dextra, which was the northwestern gate into the Roman fortress. As we move across the junction into Gilly Gate, originally called St Giles Gate, on the right-hand side of the bus, just above the shop windows, you will see a black lamp on the wall. Look behind the lamp, and you can see a small white cat. You'll see lots of these cats all over the city's buildings. Originally put there as good luck charms in Victorian times, later they became a trademark of a local architect called Tom Adams. These cats have become a feature all over the city. On the right, you can see some of the buildings have bricked up windows on the first floor. This comes from the Georgian window tax. In 1696, a law was passed on which owners were taxed on the amount of windows their property had. To avoid paying this tax, windows were bricked up. These days, when something is expensive, you'll hear people say, "That's daylight robbery." It is possible this saying comes from the old tax. You either paid up or lost your daylight, hence daylight robbery. Derives from the Latin monasterium. From here, the local monks would go out to teach or minister. It is also a cathedral because it contains the throne of a bishop. This is taken from the Latin cathedra and means seat. In York's case, the seat of an archbishop. Keep looking on your right, and as we turn, you will see Monk Bar, which is the tallest of York's gateways, standing at 63 feet, or 19.2 meters in height. On the top stand life-size stone figures known as the Wild Men of York. Legend says they will come alive and throw their boulders down onto anybody daring enough to attack the city. Castle Howard, a stately home dating back to about 1700. Castle Howard is where the period drama Brideshead Revisited was filmed. With its elegant house, beautiful gardens and lake, it is well worth a visit. We are moving into Foss Bank and running alongside York's second river, the Foss, on our left. It probably gets its name from the Latin word fossa, which means ditch or stream. There is no longer any commercial river traffic on the Foss, which was made into a canal in 1792. Today, both the Ouse and the Foss are mainly used by pleasure boats and wildlife. Looking to the right is Sainsbury's supermarket. In the 1980s, when this was being built, workmen unearthed hundreds of skeletons here. Work was stopped, and an investigation found this site to be the largest Jewish burial site outside of London, dating back to 1177. A chief rabbi was called in, the land was consecrated and declared sacred, and the bodies were left in peace. This area is known as Jewbury, which means Jewish borough or town. If you look to your right, you will see that the city walls come to an end. That's because a wall was not needed at this side of the city due to the king's fish pool, which formed a man-made defence against attack. This is one of the reasons people think the walls aren't complete. It is because there seems to be sections missing. The walls never completely circled the city, as there was no need for a wall where they met water. There would have been a tower at the end of the wall known as a postern. It was demolished in 1829 to make way for traffic. The church is mentioned in the Domesday Book of 1086, the book in which William the Conqueror listed all of the property and land he took over when he invaded, so he could tax the locals. Notice the church has two doors, a large door with a porch to the left-hand end and a smaller door to the right-hand end. The small door is known as the Devil's Door. If you look to the left, there is a 15th century timber-framed house, now the Black Swan pub. The Black Swan claims to be one of the most haunted pubs in York, but to be fair, most pubs in York claim to be either the most haunted or the oldest. It does have some rather intriguing ghosts in there though. It has a grumpy old man who sits at the bar, but nobody ever buys him a drink. A young lady sits looking into the fire, but nobody has ever seen her face, and a pair of legs which run around, bringing a whole new meaning to the phrase, getting legless in the pub. This brings us into Stonebow. This is our nearest stop for York's most famous street, the Shambles, the medieval cobbled street of the butchers, the market, the city centre shops, and the merchant adventurers hall. Please alight here for any of these places. Looking ahead, we can see the small church hall of St Crux. Just in front of St Crux on the right is York's shortest street with the longest name, Witna Watna Gate. We think it gets its name from a corruption of an old Saxon saying Witna Watna, meaning it's neither one thing nor the other. The street only has 3 properties, numbers 1, 1A and 1.5. It never gets to 2. And you may get a brief view along the Shambles. At the far end, you can see how the houses nearly touch at the top. It is said that 2 men can lean out of the windows and shake hands across the street. If you heard the shout, Gardez-Lou, you would very quickly get under the overhang of the buildings, as Gardez-Lou means watch out for the water, and meant that the contents of somebody's chamber pot was about to be deposited on your head. We move into Coppergate. It doesn't get its name from the metal copper as you might think, but from cupra, the Norse word for cup maker. It was when the new Coppergate shopping precinct was being built in the late 1970s and early 1980s that over 40,000 finds from a Viking settlement were unearthed, beautifully preserved by the silt and mud around here. What was found here was so important that it even changed the way we teach about Vikings in the national school curriculum. Today you can see what was found in the Jorvik Viking Centre, where you can travel back in time over 1,000 years in York's history to experience the sights, the sounds and even the smells of Viking York. You can visit the Viking Centre from our next stop, but please remain seated until we arrive at the Clifford's Tower stop. Coppergate on the left is Castlegate, the original street to the castle. In Castlegate you will find the Church of St Mary's, which has the tallest spire in York, and Fairfax House, which is a beautifully renovated Georgian house, built between 1740 and 1745. As we move into a relatively modern street, Clifford Street, on the right, the York Dungeon is housed in the grand old Victorian Institute of Learning. It tells the grisly side of York's history, recalling tales of torture and misery, and stories of characters such as Dick Turpin and Guy Fawkes. We are now moving into Tower Street and the site of the castle. This is your stop for the Castle Museum, Clifford's Tower, York Boat River Cruises, the Jorvik Viking Centre, York Dungeon, Fairfax House, and St George's Field Coach and Car Park. To be the Assize Courts. These days it is the Crown Court. As we pass by, you can see the bars on the cell windows. Those on trial here are still held in the same cells the offenders were held in over 200 years ago. This is due to the building being a Grade 1 listed property, so it cannot be altered inside or out. Postern Tower, which stands where the wall met the River Foss, which would have been much wider than it is today. There were 6 postern towers on the walls of York. Postern means rear entrance, and this is the only such tower still remaining. Over the hedge to our left is the graveyard of St George's Church, which has just one upstanding headstone in it. Those on the bottom deck may see this headstone through the gates on the left as we turn. This is the grave of Dick Turpin, the notorious Georgian highwayman who robbed stagecoaches in the 18th century. On the left is St George's Roman Catholic Church, which was built in 1850 for the Irish settlers who arrived in this area during the Irish potato famine. The church replaced an earlier one and was temporarily the Catholic Cathedral of York. It was designed by the architect Joseph Hanson, who also designed the Hanson Cab, a horse-drawn vehicle which was very popular in Victorian times. An example of a Hanson Cab can be seen in the Castle Museum. This street was originally called Walbergate, possibly named after a female Viking warrior named Walber. It is one of York's oldest streets, following the line of the ancient Roman road to the east. Straight ahead of us is Walmgate Bar, the most complete gateway on a city wall not only here in York, but also in the United Kingdom. This is because it still retains its barbican, which is the tunnel-like structure on the outside of the gateway. We will see the Barbican when we turn right. You will not see another original Barbican attached to a city wall unless you go to Krakow in Poland. All the others have now gone. On the side of Walmgate Bar, we can see an Elizabethan gatekeeper's house, which stands on 2 stone pillars, one either side of the central archway. We don't know where the pillars are from, but we do know they are of Roman origin. The gateway would have had only one central arch. The others on the left and right are modern. The gate still has its original 15th century oak doors. As we turn right, look to the right and you will have a brief view inside the Barbican. Imagine being trapped in there, with the soldiers throwing all kinds of nasty things down from above. In 1828, the city's cattle market was relocated to this area. Cattle and sheep were brought here from all over the country to be traded. The flat grassed areas at the foot of the walls were where livestock were kept in pens awaiting their sale. In 1971, the market was moved again, this time to Merton, a village just outside of York, and was renamed the York Livestock Centre. Is the road to Fulford, a village just south of York. This was the site of the Battle of Fulford on the 20th of September 1066, where the Vikings beat the Saxons. The Saxon army then returned the favour at the Battle of Stamford Bridge, just 5 days later. Just 3 weeks later, however, there was a third, more famous battle, the Battle of Hastings, where the Saxons, led by Harold Godwinson, were defeated by the Normans, led by William the Conqueror. Which will be coming up on the left. Please ring the bell once if you require this or any other stop, and remain seated until the bus comes to a complete stop. But you can see how the architect has tried to get the building to fit in Old York. He's put a turret shape on it and covered the walls in magnesium limestone, the same stone the minster and the city walls made of. The idea is that eventually it will blend in with its older surroundings. Look to the left, and you can see in the distance a glass structure above the River Foss. This is York's flood barrier. A barrier is lowered from this structure to stop the River Ouse backing up the River Foss, and this stops the eastern side of the city from flooding. We move on to Skeldergate Bridge and cross the River Ouse, York's main river. Look to your right to see Ouse Bridge, the oldest of the bridges built in 1821, replacing various older bridges dating back to Viking times. Look to your right, and you will see the city walls at Bale Hill, grass mound with trees growing on it. Bale Hill was the site of William the Conqueror's second castle, dating to around 1068. Nothing remains of it, however, because it was only ever made of wood, and nobody wanted to pay for its upkeep. Eventually, it was found to be in such a sad state of repair, it was pulled down. Slip, and the Swan became La Swan. There used to be older buildings outside the city walls, but in 1644, York was under siege for 3 months during the Civil War. Around 30,000 parliamentarian troops surrounded the city. However, it is said it was the royalists defending the city who pulled down the buildings outside the walls to get a better view of those attacking. We are now in an area of Victorian and Edwardian York. With the arrival of the railways to York in the 1800s, the city grew rapidly. More houses were needed to accommodate the growing population, which had shot up from 17,000 in 1801 to a staggering 77,000 by 1881. These new suburbs were built outside the city walls, with back-to-back terraces to house the people who had come to York to work on the railways and the chocolate factories. Once the railways had arrived, York became much easier to get to and quickly became quite a tourist destination for the middle classes. No longer did you have to make the long and dangerous journey down south for entertainment by horse-drawn carriage, and so York soon became the leisure and pleasure capital of the north. Chocolate making took off in York mainly with the coming of railways, although chocolate has been made in York since 1700. The two main chocolate makers in York were Terry's, who started making chocolate in 1767, and later Rowntree's, who had opened a grocer's shop in the centre of York in 1822. Home of horse racing here in York. There has been horse racing in York since Roman times, and racing has taken place on this area of land, known as the Knavesmire, since 1730. The Knavesmire may get its name from a knave, a common servant allowed to use this area for leisure and for grazing animals, and mire, a boggy area of land, which it still is to this day. The Knavesmire wasn't just used for horse racing, but other entertainments also took place here. It was common to see bare-knuckle boxing, bear racing, and cockfights here. The most popular spectator sport, however, were the hangings, which took place here from 1379 right up until 1801. People would come from far and wide to see villains hang at the Tiber. The most notorious person to be hanged at the Tiber was none other than Dick Turpin, the highway robber who was executed here on the 7th of April, 1739. In 1982, when the late Pope John Paul II visited the United Kingdom, it was the first time a reigning Pope had visited this country. He came to the racecourse here in York and gave mass to over 200,000 people. The Knavesmire is also used for music concerts, circuses, fairs, and has been the home to the largest beer festival in the north of England on many occasions. Towards the city, we travel up an area of York known as the Mount, possibly due to it being the highest land in the city. The Mount was always one of the more favoured areas to live, even in Roman times. The large buildings around this area date mainly from the Georgian and Victorian periods, and these were once private residences containing many servants. Today, most of the buildings have become hotels, guest houses, and apartments. Follows the line of the old Roman road into the city from the south, which lies to the left of the modern road, just a few feet underground. Romans used to bury their dead alongside main roads, outside their settlements, possibly because they thought the dead would like to hear the sounds of the living going on with their daily lives. There are hundreds of such burials in this area. Archaeologists initially suspected that the skeletons were those of Roman soldiers who were loyal to the Emperor Severus. He died at York in 211 AD, and his ruthless son, Caracalla, might have had the soldiers killed if they had tried to stop him from seizing power. In 2014, researchers from the York Archaeological Trust, who were leading the investigation, announced tantalizing evidence that the men were possibly gladiators brought to Britain from across the Mediterranean. They would have fought in an amphitheatre which is yet to be found. Looking ahead, we will see Micklegate Bar. This is one of the 4 main gateways into the city of York. Micklegate's name comes from Micklead, meaning Great Street, and it is said to be the front door to York. It is also known as the Royal Entrance, as it is the custom for every monarch who visits York ask permission of the Lord Mayor to be allowed into the city through this gateway. Every monarch has done this except for 2. Henry VIII, who on his second visit didn't go through the ceremony allowing him into the city, and Queen Victoria. Moving into Queen Street. Ahead of us is York's modern railway station, opened in 1877, when it claimed to be the largest railway station in the world. It is no longer the largest, but is still an amazing piece of architecture, having been built on a long curve.